The sound of rushing water filled the valley as dawn broke over Pine Hollow. My bridge, simple, sturdy, and mine, gleamed with morning dew. I built it to connect my family to the main road after years of being stranded during every storm. But when the HOA found out, they didn't see a bridge, they saw an opportunity. Within days, a letter arrived, unauthorized structure. Fine, $250. I laughed at first. $250 for what? For making my property safer? But I didn't know then, this wasn't about money. It was about control. And the moment I pushed back, I uncovered something darker hiding behind the HOA's rules, something they never wanted exposed. By the time it was over, my bridge would stand as a symbol of rebellion, and their empire would crumble. If you believe in standing up for what's right, even when power hides behind paperwork, then hit that subscribe button. At HOA Justice Hub, every story is a battle between control and courage, and every episode proves, when you fight back smart, justice always finds its way across the bridge. The rains that year were relentless. Pine Hollow, a quiet suburban community tucked between forested hills, became a maze of puddles, broken culverts, and washout road. For most people, it was an inconvenience. For me, it was a trap. Our property sat on the far edge of the neighborhood, cut off by a narrow creek that swelled every winter. When the water rose, my driveway disappeared under brown torrents. My kids couldn't get to school. Deliveries stopped. Even emergency vehicles refused to come past the bend. The HOA called it nature's inconvenience. I called it negligence. So one weekend, I decided to fix it myself. I had the tools, the plans, and most importantly, the right. It was my land. With reclaimed lumber and steel beams from my cousin's construction site, I built a small, functional bridge. Nothing fancy, just strong enough for a car and safe enough for my family. It took 3 weekends, 12 blisters, and a lifetime's worth of pride. When it was done, it looked beautiful, arched over the stream like it belonged there all along. My daughter named it Hope's Crossing. It was the first time in years I felt like I'd taken back control of something in my life. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, I saw a white SUV stop by the creek. Out stepped Marlene, the HOA president. Clipboard, sunglasses, fake smile. The kind of woman who said community, like it was a weapon. She snapped photos from every angle, her lips pressed tight, and then drove off without a word. I knew something was coming. I just didn't expect it so soon. The letter arrived the next morning, certified mail. The words, violation notice, stamped in red across the top. They claimed I had constructed an unauthorized structure without HOA approval, citing some vague clause buried in a 48-page covenant written decades ago. The fine, $250. $250. For building a bridge on my own land to access my own home. At first, I laughed. It had to be a mistake. But when I called, the HOA office was firm. You are in violation, the voice on the phone said flatly. You'll need to remove the structure or submit an application for retroactive approval, including an engineering inspection and a $100 processing fee. So now it wasn't $250. It was $350, and humiliation. I asked to speak with Marlene. The receptionist hesitated, then transferred me. Marlene's voice was syrupy but sharp. We can't have people just building whatever they want. It sets a bad precedent. A bad precedent? I repeated. For fixing what your HOA ignored for years? There was a pause. Then she said, we'll be monitoring compliance. The line went dead. That night, as the rain returned, I sat by the window and watched the creek rise. My bridge held steady. Cars passed easily, headlights reflecting off the wet plank. It felt good, right? But deep down, I sensed something shifting. The HOA wasn't just testing my patience, they were testing my boundaries. A week later, 2 men showed up wearing reflective vests, claiming to be property assessors. They took pictures, measured the bridge, and whispered to each other before leaving without explanation. The next morning, another letter. A cease and desist order, warning of escalating fines and possible legal remedies. They were escalating. That's when I started documenting everything: emails, photos, timestamp. I discovered something interesting. The HOA's bylaws didn't even mention bridges. They covered sheds, fences, and exterior paint colors, but nothing about access structures or private crossings. The clause they cited was deliberately vague, possibly unenforceable. It was leverage, not law. So I decided to fight back, smart, quiet, and by the book. I filed a public request for the HOA's financial reports, which, under state law, every homeowner had a right to see. Marlene didn't like that. She delayed, deflected, and finally sent me a scanned PDF, half the pages redacted. But one line item caught my eye: Drainage Maintenance Fund, $18,400, disbursed. $18,000, supposedly spent on drainage projects that no one in the neighborhood had ever seen. That's when I realized my bridge wasn't their problem. It was their cover-up. They needed to make an example out of me before anyone asked questions. But they picked the wrong homeowner. That weekend, I set up my camera, recorded everything, and uploaded it to a small neighborhood forum titled, "What My HOA Doesn't Want You to See." Within hours, it spread. Neighbors started commenting, others who'd been fined for nonsense. A flower bed too wide, a mailbox too tall, a fence 2 shades off regulation beige. Marlene called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. The room went silent when I walked in. Her eyes narrowed as I laid down the printouts, the redacted financials, the violation letters, the photos of neglected drainage ditches. "This," I said calmly, "is why I built the bridge. And this is why you tried to stop me." Whispers erupted around the table. Marlene's face paled. "You're out of order," she said shakily. "No," I replied. "You are." I left before she could respond. The next morning, I found a new letter taped to my door, bold, angry, and threatening. They were going to take legal action. But I wasn't scared anymore. Because now, I had proof. And soon, the whole neighborhood would see exactly what their HOA had been hiding. The morning after that final letter, something inside me shifted. Fear turned into focus. They wanted to intimidate me into silence, but all they'd done was light a fire. The HOA thought I was just another homeowner, someone who'd cave at the first mention of legal action. They didn't know I had time, patience, and a camera lens that didn't blink. I began documenting everything, not just the bridge, but the entire neighborhood. The broken storm drains, the rusted culverts, the algae-filled retention pond that hadn't been serviced in years. I filmed it all and time-stamped every shot. I wasn't building a defense anymore, I was building a case. By noon, I had 50 videos and 200 photographs. I uploaded them to a private folder titled HOA Evidence. Then, I printed out the HOA bylaws and began highlighting inconsistencies. Section 3.1, Maintenance of Common Property, clearly stated that drainage structures were the HOA's responsibility. Yet, under Section 4.7, Unauthorized Alterations, they claimed homeowners could not perform maintenance on any structure connected to common property, even if the HOA neglected it. It was a perfect trap. They ignored repairs, fined anyone who tried to fix them, and pocketed the maintenance budget. Still, I needed proof of misuse. That meant finding the paper trail. I emailed the HOA's treasurer, a quiet man named Greg who rarely spoke during meetings. My message was polite but pointed. Under State Statute 422, homeowners are entitled to access full, unredacted financial statements upon written request. Please provide records of disbursements from the Drainage Maintenance Fund from the last 2 years. No reply. 2 days later, I sent a certified letter. Still no reply. On the 3rd day, I knocked on Greg's door. His porch light flickered on, and he cracked the door an inch. His voice was nervous. "I can't talk about this," he muttered. Then why are you whispering? I asked. He glanced around, swallowed hard, and said, Because Marlene listens. Then he shut the door. That's when I realized, even inside the HOA, fear ruled. That night, I filed a Freedom of Information request with the county office. The HOA, though private, had to file certain maintenance invoices for tax purposes. It took a week, but the clerk handed me a thin folder labeled Pine Hollow HOA Infrastructure Record. Inside were 12 invoices. 10 were legitimate, small repair jobs, landscaping, signage. But 2 stood out. Both were from a company called Hollis Engineering, totaling $18,400, the same number from the drainage fund. But Hollis Engineering didn't exist anymore. I checked. The business had dissolved 3 years prior. It was a ghost invoice. I drove to the address listed on the form, a small warehouse lot now leased to a car repair shop. The owner said no one by that name had operated there in years. That meant one thing. Marlene, or someone on her board, had been fabricating maintenance expenses to siphon HOA funds. I finally had something real. The next HOA meeting was in 2 days. I prepared a binder of evidence, organized by date and statute. I didn't want confrontation, I wanted exposure. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. That evening, as I reviewed everything at my kitchen table, headlights swept across my window. A car idled outside for nearly a minute, then pulled away. I felt a chill. The next morning, I found muddy tire tracks at the edge of my driveway and fresh footprints leading toward my bridge. Someone had been there. The camera I'd mounted near the creek had been turned off. I replayed the footage from earlier that night. Around 1:47 a.m., 2 figures in dark clothing appeared, one holding a flashlight, the other carrying something metallic. They examined the bridge for a few minutes, then left. By dawn, I was furious. The HOA had crossed a line from bureaucracy to trespassing. I made 3 copies of the footage and stored them in separate places. Then, I uploaded a still frame of the intruders to the neighborhood forum. I didn't accuse anyone directly, I just captioned it. Someone visited my property last night. Recognize them? Within hours, the post exploded. Comments flooded in. Some defended the HOA, others demanded answers. The neighborhood was divided, and Marlene's carefully controlled illusion of authority began to crack. At 6 p.m., she called an emergency virtual meeting. I joined, camera on, binder in hand. Marlene appeared on screen, her expression brittle. There's been misinformation circulating, she began, voice trembling with restrained anger. Certain individuals are spreading baseless claims that undermine the integrity of our board. I waited for her to finish, then spoke calmly. Baseless claims? I asked. Then perhaps you can explain these invoices. I held the documents up to the camera. Hollis Engineering, $18,400. The screen froze for a moment as the silence spread. Then Greg's small, pixelated square flickered. Those weren't mine, he whispered. Marlene cut him off. Greg, don't. But it was too late. The truth had cracked through the facade. I continued. These payments were made to a dissolved company. The funds came from the drainage maintenance budget that never fixed a single drain. Meanwhile, homeowners were fined for fixing their own access routes. Like my bridge. Marlene's face went red. You are not authorized to access those records. Actually, I said, opening the binder, I am, under Section 422 of state law. And I've already shared copies with the county office. The chat erupted. Homeowners flooded the comments with questions, demands, outrage. Marlene's screen blinked off, replaced by a black square that read connection lost. But the damage was done. The next morning, the HOA office door was locked, the phone line disconnected. Rumors spread fast. Board resignations, emergency audits, even whispers of legal trouble. I thought it was over. I thought I'd won. Until I stepped outside and saw the damage. My bridge was gone. The planks lay scattered downstream, snapped and splintered. The supports had been sawed through, not by water but by hands. My heart sank as I waded into the cold creek, pulling up what remained. It wasn't just destruction. It was revenge. I stood in the water, soaked and shaking, watching the current drag away what I'd built. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I whispered to myself, they want war? They've got one. Because this time, I wasn't going to rebuild quietly. This time I was going public. The morning my bridge disappeared, the world felt different, quieter, heavier. The sound of running water that used to soothe me now mocked me with every splash. Pieces of my handiwork floated downstream like ghosts of defiance. Someone hadn't just torn down a structure. They'd tried to erase my fight. I spent the first few hours in disbelief, collecting fragments, pulling warped beams out of the mud. My hands bled from splinters, but the pain didn't matter. Each broken board was proof. Whoever did this wanted to send a message: stop fighting or this gets worse. But they underestimated how stubborn I could be. By noon, I had gathered enough debris to fill the bed of my truck. I took photos from every angle, close-ups of saw marks, footprints in the soft bank, the direction of the cut. This wasn't vandalism, it was targeted destruction. I drove straight to the county sheriff's office. The deputy at the front desk barely looked up until I dropped a folder thick with photos and documents onto the counter. I want to file a criminal complaint, I said. He flipped through the pictures, eyes narrowing. You sure it was the HOA? I nodded. I've got security footage of 2 people on my property the night before. They knew exactly what they were doing. He pursed his lips. You're saying your HOA president vandalized your bridge? I'm saying someone under her orders did, I replied. He sighed. All right. We'll open an investigation. You'll get a case number by tomorrow. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, I posted a new update to the neighborhood forum titled, "They Destroyed My Bridge." The photos spoke for themselves: sawed beams, muddy footprints, the collapsed structure. Within hours, the post had hundreds of comments. Neighbors who'd once stayed silent were furious. I can't believe this. They've gone too far. Who's next? Marlene tried to reply, claiming the bridge was a safety hazard that had been removed for the community's protection. But the video I uploaded, grainy night footage of 2 shadowed figures with flashlights and saws, made her look like a liar. The tide was turning. 2 days later, a news van showed up. Channel 9, Local Investigations Desk. A reporter named Claire Bennett asked if I'd be willing to go on record. I hesitated at first, but she promised to tell the full story, how one man's small act of self-reliance had turned into a fight against corruption. We filmed by the creek. She stood beside me as the camera rolled, the destroyed bridge behind us. Tell us what this means to you, she said softly. I looked into the lens. This bridge wasn't just wood and metal, I said. It was freedom from neglect. And they destroyed it to keep control. That night, the story aired under the headline, "Homeowner Claims HOA Corruption After Bridge Demolished." It spread faster than I expected. By morning, the HOA's voicemail was full. A county inspector called, requesting a meeting to review compliance concerns. The sheriff's office confirmed that the vandalism was under active investigation. But the most surprising thing? Greg, the timid treasurer, showed up at my door. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes. They made me sign the invoices, he confessed. Marlene told me it was for drainage improvements. I didn't know they were fake until your video. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because they're panicking, he said. Marlene's shredding documents. You need to act fast. I invited him in. Over coffee, he revealed everything. Marlene and 2 other board members had created the fake company, funneled funds through maintenance accounts, and used homeowner fines to cover their personal expenses, spa trips, renovations, even a private landscaping project for Marlene's yard. I recorded every word with his permission. That night, I compiled everything. The invoices, Greg's statement, the video footage, the news broadcast, into a single digital file. Then I sent it to 3 places: the county auditor, the State Homeowners Association Oversight Board, and the local newspaper's editor. The next morning, Pine Hollow wasn't the same place anymore. Neighbors gathered outside the HOA office as county vehicles rolled in. 2 uniformed officers carried boxes of documents out the door. Marlene stood nearby, arms crossed, jaw tight, pretending not to care, but her eyes darted around like a trapped animal's. The news trucks came back. Reporters interviewed homeowners, each one angrier than the last. Fines, threats, intimidation, it all came pouring out. Pine Hollow's perfect community had turned into a scandalous headline. That evening, I walked to the creek. The sunset cast long shadows across the ruined bridge. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. There was something hollow about it. I'd won the fight, but lost something personal. Hope's Crossing, what my daughter named, was gone. As I stood there, I heard footsteps behind me. Greg again. He looked different, lighter somehow. "You did it," he said quietly. "They're done. The state's freezing the HOA's accounts." I nodded. "What happens next?" "They'll dissolve the board. New elections, maybe even legal charges. Marlene's lawyer already quit." We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the creek's gentle flow. Then Greg said something that stayed with me. "You didn't just expose them. You reminded everyone that power only works when people stay silent." He left soon after, but his words echoed long after he was gone. That night, I received one final email from Marlene. No greeting, no signature, just a single sentence. "You think this is over, but you've made powerful enemies." I stared at the screen for a long time before closing the laptop. Maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't over. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I rebuilt that bridge once. I could do it again. Only this time, I wasn't building it for convenience. I was building it as a symbol of defiance, of truth, of the fact that no amount of power could stand forever against someone willing to fight back. The next morning, I began again. Fresh lumber. New beams. Stronger bolts. As I worked, neighbors came by to help. People who'd once avoided me out of fear. Together, we raised the new bridge by sunset. This time, I carved a name into the main plank before sealing it with varnish. Justice's Crossing. When it was done, I stood at the center, feeling the wood solid beneath my boots, the creek whispering below. The air smelled like freedom, wet earth and pine and something clean. Then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A distorted voice said, "You should have stayed quiet." And the line went dead. The voice on the phone was low, deliberate, and too calm to be a prank. "You should have stayed quiet." Then, silence. For a long moment, I just stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the faint static that followed. The sun had already dipped behind the trees, and the creek below my new bridge whispered in the dim light. The rebuilt structure, Justice's Crossing, still smelled of fresh lumber and varnish. But now, that pride I'd felt turned into a pulse of unease. Someone was watching. I checked my call log, unknown number, no location. I tried calling back, but it went straight to a deadline. The timing couldn't have been coincidence. The story had just gone public. The HOA board was collapsing, and the state audit was underway. Whoever made that call wasn't just angry, they were desperate. I decided to install cameras, real ones this time. 2 by the bridge, 1 by the driveway, 1 facing the road. Every lens had motion sensors and night vision. I wasn't taking chances anymore. By the next morning, I thought I could breathe again. Then I found the note. It was wedged under my windshield wiper, written on a piece of HOA stationery. Just 5 words in capital letters. "Stop before it gets worse." My hands tightened on the paper until it crumpled. I looked around, scanning every driveway, every window. The neighborhood felt quiet, too quiet. Curtains shifted. A car door shut somewhere in the distance. I realized then that I didn't know who was still loyal to Marlene. She had ruled this place for a decade with fear, fines, and whispers. Just because she was gone didn't mean her influence was. I called the sheriff's office, reporting the threat. They sent an officer to take a statement. He was sympathetic but cautious. Could be anyone, he said. When people lose control, they lash out. Just stay alert. We'll increase patrols. Stay alert. Easier said than done. That evening, I went through my camera feeds. Nothing unusual until around midnight. Then, movement. A figure crossed the edge of my driveway, briefly illuminated by the floodlight. A hoodie, gloves, something metallic glinting in one hand. They didn't come close, just stood there watching. After a few seconds, they turned and disappeared into the woods. I froze the frame and zoomed in. The footage was grainy, but I could make out the logo on the sleeve. A patch, circular, with faded letters that looked familiar. HOA Security Patrol. I felt my stomach drop. Marlene may have been cornered legally, but she still had loyalists willing to do her dirty work. By the next morning, I was done playing defense. I gathered everything, the phone call log, the note, the footage, and went straight to the sheriff. This time, I didn't want sympathy. I wanted results. The detective on duty was different, older, sharper. He looked through my evidence carefully. "You've stirred up something bigger than a petty fine," he said. "If these threats continue, we can file for a protection order. Meanwhile, let us handle the intimidation." I thanked him, but deep down, I knew I couldn't just rely on the system. The same system that let Marlene thrive for years. That night, I sat at my desk and started writing. Every event, every detail, from the first violation notice to the destroyed bridge, the fake invoices, Greg's confession, the late-night call. I wanted a record, something no one could erase. I titled it simply, The Bridge War. And then, something unexpected happened. Claire Bennett, the news reporter who'd first covered my story, called again. "We're doing a follow-up," she said. "Turns out, your HOA isn't the only one. We've had a dozen calls from homeowners in nearby neighborhoods reporting the same corruption tactics, fake fines, fabricated maintenance charges, intimidation." Her words lit a spark inside me. "You mean this is bigger than Pine Hollow?" "Much bigger," she replied. "I want to film a documentary. About you, your bridge, and what this exposed. Will you help us?" For a moment, I hesitated. More exposure meant more danger. But then I remembered the note, the threats, the fear. If I stayed quiet, they'd win. "Yes," I said finally. "Let's do it." 2 weeks later, cameras rolled again. This time, not just for a short news clip but for a full investigation. They filmed everything. The rebuilt bridge, my footage of the trespassers, Greg's interview, and the paperwork trail. The story aired nationally under the title, Crossing the Line, the HOA Scandal Exposed. Overnight, everything changed. Messages poured in from across the country. People thanking me for standing up, sharing their own horror stories of HOA corruption. Online forums buzzed with outrage. A state senator even called for new legislation regulating HOA financial transparency. But not everyone was cheering. A black SUV began parking near the entrance of the neighborhood, engine running, lights off. It wasn't anyone's car from Pine Hollow. The first night, I brushed it off as coincidence. The second night, it followed me when I drove to the store. The third night, I stopped caring about coincidence. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the license plate. When I uploaded it to a public forum later, an anonymous account replied within minutes. "Don't post things you can't protect." It sent a chill through me deeper than the creek's winter water ever could. Then, 2 nights later, someone tried to break into my garage. The sound of metal scraping woke me at 2 a.m. I grabbed my flashlight, crept downstairs, and flung open the door. The intruder bolted into the dark woods. They didn't take anything, but they left a single item behind. A manila folder. Inside were photos of me, my family, my house, printed on glossy paper. Some were taken through windows, some were from the creekside trail. And at the very bottom, a typed note. "This is your final warning. Walk away." I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, I called Claire again. You need to see something, I said. When she arrived with her cameraman, I handed her the folder. She flipped through the photos, her expression hardening. We're not stopping, she said. If they're threatening you, it means they're scared. She was right. The truth was cornering them, and cornered people lash out. That afternoon, I met with the sheriff again, turning over the folder and video evidence. He nodded grimly. You're rattling someone powerful. Keep your cameras on. We'll increase surveillance in the area. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't end with patrols or paperwork. Because this wasn't about one bridge anymore. It was about power, how it's built, abused, and what happens when someone dares to cross it. As I stood by the water that night, moonlight glinting off the surface, I whispered to the empty air, "You should have stayed quiet?" I smiled bitterly. "No, you should have stayed honest." The creek carried the words away, echoing softly through Pine Hollow, where the next battle was already waiting. The following week felt like walking through a storm I couldn't see, silent, invisible, but suffocating. The cameras around my property caught every flutter of movement, every rustle of branches, every flicker of headlights. Still, the air felt heavy with threat, like the world was holding its breath. I tried to keep life normal. I worked, I fixed things around the house, I smiled at my daughter even when she asked, "Dad, are the bad people gone?" But the truth was, I didn't know anymore who the bad people were. They were shadows now, lawyers, loyalists, and cowards hiding behind fear. Then, one evening, the phone rang again. This time, the number wasn't blocked. "Detective Harper, Pine County Sheriff's Office," the voice said. "We have updates on your case." Finally, I drove to the station, heart pounding. Harper was waiting, his desk buried in paperwork. "We traced that black SUV," he began. "It's registered to a company called Silver Oak Management." The name hit me like ice. Silver Oak was the regional management firm that handled dozens of HOA boards, including Pine Hollow's. Marlene wasn't just a local tyrant, she had corporate backing. "They handle the money," Harper continued. "Financial oversight, fines, escrow accounts. But here's where it gets strange. Silver Oak received transfers from your HOA's bank account totaling over $200,000 in the last 3 years. The records don't match any of their official invoices." "So it's embezzlement?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "At best. At worst, racketeering." I sat back, stunned. "And Marlene?" Harper's expression tightened. "She's gone. Packed up 2 nights ago. Neighbors said a moving truck came at midnight. We're tracking her now." I didn't speak. I just stared at the floor, fury burning cold. She had run, not because she was innocent, but because she knew the walls were closing in. When I returned home, the news had already broken. "Local HOA under criminal investigation," the headline read. My name was everywhere again. Neighbors stopped me on the street to thank me, to apologize, to whisper stories about how they'd been too afraid to speak. For the first time, people weren't scared of the HOA, they were angry at it. But power doesn't die quietly. That night, I heard the sound of gravel crunching outside. I grabbed my flashlight and peered through the blinds. A figure stood near the bridge, half hidden by moonlight. For a moment, I thought it was another trespasser, but then I saw the face. "Greg." I stepped outside. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I know," he replied, voice trembling. "But you need to see this." He handed me a flash drive. I backed up Marlene's emails before she disappeared. I didn't know who else to trust. Inside, I found everything: messages between Marlene and Silver Oak executives detailing their scheme. They used inflated maintenance costs and fictitious repair bids to funnel HOA money into private accounts. My bridge? Just a distraction. The fines were their control mechanism, a way to silence anyone who looked too closely. One email stood out. "Ensure the homeowner with the unauthorized bridge is discredited publicly. If he escalates, handle it quietly." I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. Handle it quietly. Those were the words that had led to my bridge being destroyed, to my house being watched, to threats whispered over the phone. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse and handed the flash drive to the state investigator overseeing the HOA audit. She looked through the files, her expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief. "This isn't just corruption," she said. "This is a network." She promised to bring it to the Attorney General. By that evening, everything exploded. Local and state news channels picked up the story. State launches criminal investigation into HOA management firm. Reporters swarmed Pine Hollow. Silver Oak's headquarters went dark within hours. Their website disappeared. Phones disconnected. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my chest. But that feeling didn't last. Around midnight, my cameras detected movement again. This time, multiple figures. 3 men, dressed in dark clothing, moving along the tree line. They didn't approach the bridge, they circled my house. I called 911, whispering into the phone, describing every detail. "Stay inside," the operator said. "Units are on their way." I turned off the lights and watched the live feed on my phone. One of the men pointed toward the front door, another gestured toward the back. They were coordinating. My pulse hammered in my ears. Then headlights cut through the night. Sirens. The men bolted, vanishing into the trees. The deputies arrived minutes later. They searched the area, found footprints and tire marks, but no suspects. "They're spooked now," one of them said. "You're making powerful enemies nervous." I should have been terrified. But instead, I felt calm, because fear meant I was close to something. The next morning, I got a call from Claire. "They arrested 2 Silver Oak executives," she said breathlessly. "They confessed, emails, wire transfers, all of it. Marlene's name came up in every document." "Did they find her?" "Not yet," she said quietly. "But the AG's office just issued a warrant. She won't get far." For the first time in months, the creek outside my window sounded peaceful again. I stepped out to the bridge and looked down at the reflection of the morning sky rippling across the water. Neighbors began gathering, clapping as I walked past. One of them had printed a sign and nailed it to the post near the creek. "No HOA. No fear. Pine Hollow free." For a moment, I closed my eyes, letting it all sink in. The exhaustion, the victory, the bittersweet satisfaction that came when truth finally triumphed. But I also knew something else. Truth always leaves scars. When I went back inside, a package was waiting on my porch. No return address. Inside was a single photo of Marlene, sitting in a car, looking straight at the camera. Someone had taken it recently. On the back, in her handwriting, was one final message. "You built your bridge. But some bridges burn both ways." The ink was still fresh. I looked toward the creek, the sunlight glinting off the new planks of Justice's Crossing, and whispered, "I'm ready for whatever crosses next." Because this wasn't just about a bridge anymore. It was about what stood on the other side: truth, freedom, and the cost of standing up when everyone else stays silent. The world outside my window had changed, but the silence hadn't. Even with the headlines, the arrests, and the cheers from neighbors who finally felt free, there was still a cold current running through the heart of Pine Hollow, a warning that the story wasn't over. Not yet. 4 days after the package arrived, I couldn't shake the image of Marlene's face staring back at me from that photograph. Her eyes weren't afraid. They were calm, calculating, like a chess player waiting for the next move. She'd lost her board, but she hadn't quit the game. I started noticing little things again. A car idling longer than usual at the end of my street. Mail that came opened or missing altogether. Anonymous calls that hung up the moment I answered. The storm wasn't gone, it was circling back, waiting for the perfect time to strike. One evening, just as the sun was melting into the horizon, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Last conversation." Inside was a message only 2 sentences long. "Meet me at the bridge. Sunset. No police. No name, no signature, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was. My first instinct was to call Detective Harper, but something inside me stopped. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe, deep down, I wanted this confrontation. To end it where it began, at the bridge. As the sky turned amber and the trees bled gold light, I walked down the dirt path toward Justice's crossing. The boards creaked under my boots, the sound echoing across the creek. On the far side, standing perfectly still, was Marlene. She looked different, disheveled but defiant, her once pristine blazer now worn, her sunglasses gone. In her hands, she held nothing but a manila folder. "Surprised to see me?" she said, her voice thin but sharp. "Not really," I replied. "You always liked making an entrance." She smirked faintly. "You ruined everything, you know. Years of work, partnerships, stability. You turned neighbors into enemies." "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. "I just pulled the curtain back." Her expression hardened. "Do you think you won? You exposed a few bad invoices and made yourself a local hero. But people forget. They move on. And the system," she paused, tapping the folder, "the system always rebuilds itself." I stepped closer. "Then I'll just keep crossing the bridge until it collapses again." She let out a dry laugh. "You sound proud of that. You think you're the good guy. But you're no different than me. You built something without permission. You broke rules. The only difference is that people liked your rebellion." "Maybe," I said. "But I built something to help people cross. You built walls to keep them trapped." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The creek murmured beneath us, the current catching bits of fallen leaves. Then she opened the folder. Inside were photographs, of me, my house, my family. The same ones that had been left in that earlier threat. She flipped through them, then let them scatter into the wind. "These were supposed to scare you," she said softly. "But you didn't scare. Why didn't you stop when you had the chance?" I asked. "You could have fixed it. Owned up." Her gaze drifted to the water. "Because control is addictive. People think power is about money, but it's not. It's about watching others obey." There was a sadness in her voice now, real, unguarded. "You broke that spell," she added. "And now I have nothing left to control." Before I could respond, I saw flashing blue lights in the distance, police vehicles pulling up the main road. She noticed too. Her expression turned resigned. "Guess this is it," she said. Detective Harper stepped out of one of the cars, calling her name through a loudspeaker. She didn't run. She just looked at me and said, "You built your bridge. Now cross it." They cuffed her quietly. No struggle. No last words. She glanced back once as they guided her to the car, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw gratitude, like she was relieved it was finally over. After the police left, the bridge felt eerily still. The sun had slipped below the trees, painting the water in deep orange streaks. I leaned against the railing, listening to the creek's steady rhythm. The fight was over. But victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet. Heavy. In the weeks that followed, the news called it the Pine Hollow scandal. Silver Oak executives faced trial. The state passed new laws requiring HOA financial transparency. Neighbors elected a new board, this time volunteers, not tyrants. People smiled again. Kids played in the cul-de-sacs without parents whispering about fines or violations. The fear was gone. As for me, I rebuilt the bridge one final time, replacing every board, sealing every joint, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to give it new life. At the dedication, the neighborhood gathered. Greg stood beside me, holding a plaque that read, "Justice's Crossing, built by one, stood for all." When the crowd cheered, I looked across the creek and saw my reflection, tired, scarred, but free. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home, I stood on the bridge alone. The stars shimmered above, and the cool breeze carried the scent of pine and rain. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the threats, the courage it took just to keep standing. Then, faintly, from somewhere far downstream, I heard something, a sound like footsteps across wood. I turned, half expecting to see someone there. But there was no one. Just the wind moving through the trees, the current whispering beneath the boards. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was closure. I whispered to the darkness, "Some bridges burn. But the right ones, they never fall." And with that, I walked across Justice's Crossing one last time, each step echoing softly, a reminder that even the smallest act of defiance can carry the weight of justice, if you're brave enough to build it.